Now the gospel today is our third week talking about bread. And preview, there's 2 more weeks talking about bread. In the Gospel of John chapter 6. Now we start again with the last line of last week's reading. Jesus says he is the bread of life. And here the crowd begins to question Jesus a little more strenuously. They're a little more argumentative than last time, even hostile towards him. They say, "What do you mean you're the bread that came from heaven? You're Jesus. I know your parents. Come on. That's impossible." And I know last week I was kind of defending the crowd a little bit, saying, cut them a little slack. It's getting harder to do that as they become more hostile. But I'm going to try still. Now, we did skip a little bit from last week. And in the verses not read today, Jesus says, "He is the bread of life that came from heaven to do the will of he who sent me." So maybe if we had heard the whole story, not chopped up, it might be a little clearer what he's saying. But the crowds, either way, still are missing the point. Now, many of the people say they know Jesus' parents. They say, "Is this not Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? How can he now say, 'I have come down from heaven'?" Well, the people who know you best are supposed to believe in you the most, right? That's what we like to think. But not the case here. The people he knew before he became a teacher and a healer do not welcome him. Instead, they start questioning him. They wonder how this lowly carpenter can perform signs and claim to be from God. The people were not receptive to Jesus' message. They wouldn't listen because they couldn't see past that image that they had in their minds of who Jesus was. Now, another reason the crowd is so stubborn is because of their tradition and their religious beliefs. Jesus here is using a bread metaphor because it is familiar to the people. He knows that they understand bread because Moses fed the people in the wilderness with the bread from heaven, which was manna. But it's interesting, the Hebrew word manna means, what is it? They actually didn't know what it was. So this is a story, the story of Moses, that all the Jewish people would know. And that's part of the problem. As Jesus says, "I am the bread of heaven," the people automatically reply, "No, you're not. That was manna in the past. That's the bread from heaven." They're so used to the story that they're not really trying to think outside of it. Their context is holding them back, so they start complaining. Jesus is trying to use something that they already know about to expand into some new ideas here. This is not about their ancestors in the desert. This is about God active in the present time, the living God. It's not about their past, it's about the future. And the past is what is holding them back from really hearing Jesus' message today. Their traditions and their well-taught beliefs. But tradition is a wonderful thing, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that. And Jesus isn't trying to discount their traditions or beliefs. He's trying to use it as a base to expand their thought into something new and wonderful. Because as we have studied in John, every time we read John, belief in God is not a stagnant thing. You don't just believe and then sit there. It's an ever-growing relationship. It's always changing. Our traditions keep us grounded, but when we get too rigid in it, then it holds us back. And this is what's happening today. Jesus says he comes from God, and then the people just say, "No, he came from here. He's the son of Mary." And Jesus says, "I'm the bread of heaven." So they say, "No, you're not." And just imagine the tone. "No, you're not," right? That's the problem with familiarity. The people know Jesus, so they can't comprehend that he could ever be more. than just a carpenter. We have this idea of God, and they did too, coming down in clouds and fire and lightning bolts. Like we want a whirlwind. Not this man, Jesus, who I watched grow up, who as a kid played with my kids. He can't be special. That's the thought. And that's part of the point of this, that God comes in Jesus to show that God is with us in the everyday, in ordinary things. God is always using ordinary things to reach us. We're regular folks, right? God uses us to reach out into the world. God uses bread, probably the most ordinary food that you could possibly have, to reach us and to reach out to the crowds in the story. God uses our wafers and wine to reach us when we come here for Eucharist. And pre-consecration, trust me, our wafers and wine are very ordinary. The wafers get ordered from a catalog, and the wine comes from Carps in East Islip. But through God, they become more than just ordinary things that you can buy at the store. They become the body and blood of Christ. They become sacraments, real, physical, tangible signs of God's grace and love for us. And that's the same thing that happens with us. The crowd in the gospel is very stubborn. I can understand that. They get angry because they don't understand what's happening. So they're kind of missing the point of Jesus. They miss his love, his message, and the power he has to heal and bring peace. But most importantly, they miss the chance to become agents of his message in the world. Because God never says that we have to be perfect in order to do God's will. That's not in the Bible. It's actually the opposite. The vast majority of the saints that we honor are very far from perfect people, if you start reading about some of these saints. So we can't let our own feelings of inadequacy or our preconceptions or our confusion block us from going out and doing God's work and changing the world. That's our mission as Christians. We need to be agents of God's grace, using our own ordinary selves, our voices, our minds, our hearts, for good. Even if we maybe don't feel like we're so extraordinary, all things ordinary are made extraordinary with God's help, including us. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.